أعوذ بالله من الشيطان اللعين الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. ياسين والقرآن الحكيم إنك لمن المرسلين على صراط مستقيم. تنزيل العزيز الرحيم لتنذر قوما ما أنذر آباؤهم فهم غافلون. لقد حق القول على أكثرهم فهم لا يؤمنون. إنا جعلنا في أعناقهم أغلالا فهي إلى الأذقان فهم مقمحون. وجعلنا من بين أيديهم سدا ومن خلفهم سدا فأغشيناهم فهم لا يبصرون. والسواء عليهم أنذرتهم أم لم تنذرهم لا يؤمنون. إنما تنذر من اتبع الذكر وخشي الرحمن بالغيب فبشره بمغفرة وأجر كريم. إنا نحن نحيي الموتى ونكتب ما قدموا وآثارهم وكل شيء أحصيناه في إمام مبين. واضرب لهم مثلا أصحاب القرية إذ جاء المرسلون إذ أرسلنا إليهم اثنين فكذبوهما فعززنا بالثالث فقالوا إنا إليكم مرسلون. قالوا ما أنتم إلا بشر مثلنا وما أنزل الرحمن من شيء إن أنتم إلا تكذبون. قالوا ربنا يعلم إنا إليكم لمرسلون وما علينا إلا البلاغ المبين. قالوا إنا تطيرنا بكم لئن لم تنتهوا لنرجمنكم وليمسنكم منا عذاب عليم. قالوا طائركم معكم وإن ذكرتم بل أنتم قوم مسرفون. وجاء من أقصى المدينة رجل يسعى قال يا قوم اتبعوا المرسلين اتبعوا من لا يسألكم أجرا وهم مهتدون. وما لي لا أعبد الذي فطرني وإليه ترجعون. أتخذ من دوني آلهة إن يردني الرحمن بضر لا تغني عني شفاعتهم شيئا ولا ينقذون. إني إذا لفي ضلال مبين. إني آمنت بربكم فاسمعون. قيل ادخل الجنة قال يا ليت قومي يعلمون. بما غفر لي ربي وجعلني من المكرمين. وما أنزلنا على قومه من بعده من جند من السماء وما كنا منزلين. إن كانت إلا صيحة واحدة فإذا هم خامدون. يا حسرة على العباد ما يأتي من رسول إلا كانوا به يستهزئون. ألم يروا كم أهلكنا قبلهم من القرون أنهم إليهم لا يرجعون. وإن كل لما جميع لدينا محضرون. وآية لهم الأرض الميتة وأحييناها وأخرجنا منها حبا فمنه يأكلون. وجعلنا فيها جنات من نخيل وعناب وفجرنا فيها من العيون ليأكلوا من ثمره وما عملت أيديهم أفلا يشكرون. سبحان الذي خلق الأزواج كلها مما تنبت الأرض ومن أنفسهم ومما لا يعلمون. وآية لهم الليل نسلخ منه النهار فإذا هم مظلمون. والشمس تجري لمستقر لها ذلك تقدير العزيز العليم. والقمر قدرناه منازل حتى عاد كالعرجون القديم. لا الشمس ينبغي لها أن تدرك القمر ولا الليل سابق النهار وكل في فلك يسبحون. وآية لهم أنا حملنا ذرية في الفلك المشحون وخلقنا لهم من مثله ما يركبون وإن نشأ نغرقهم فلا صريخ لهم ولا هم ينقذون إلا رحمة منا ومتاعا إلى حين وإذا قيل لهم اتقوا ما بين أيديكم وما خلفكم لعلكم ترحمون وما تأتيهم من آية من آيات ربهم إلا كانوا عنها معرضين وإذا قيل لهم أنفقوا مما رزقكم الله قال الذين كفروا للذين آمنوا ونطعم من لو يشاء الله أطعمه إن أنتم إلا في ضلال مبين ويقولون متى هذا الوعد إن كنتم صادقين ما ينظرون إلا صيحة واحدة تأخذهم وهم يخصمون فلا يستطيعون توصية ولا إلى أهلهم يرجعون ونفخ في الصور فإذا من الأجداث إلى ربهم ينسلون قالوا يا ويلنا من بعثنا من مركدنا هذا ما وعد الرحمن وصدق المرسلون إن كانت إلا صيحة واحدة فإذا هم جميع لدينا محضرون فاليوم لا تظلم نفس شيئا ولا تجزون إلا ما كنتم تعملون إن أصحاب الجنة اليوم في شغل فاكهون هم وأزواجهم في ظلال على الأرائك متكئون لهم فيها فاكهة ولهم ما يدعون سلام قولا من رب رحيم وامتازوا اليوم أيها المجرمون ألم أعهد إليكم يا بني آدم أن لا تعبدوا الشيطان إنه لكم عدو مبين وأن اعبدوني هذا صراط مستقيم ولقد ضل منكم جبلا كثيرا أفلم تكونوا تعقلون هذه جهنم التي كنتم توعدون اصلوا اليوم بما كنتم تكفرون اليوم نختم على أفواههم وتكلمنا أيديهم وتشهد أرجلهم بما كانوا يكسبون ولو نشاء لتمسنا على أعينهم فاستبقوا الصراط فعنا يبصرون ولو نشاء لمسخناهم على مكانة فما استطاعوا مضيا ولا يرجعون ومن نعمر ننكس في الخلق فلا يعقلون وما علمناه الشعر ما ينبغي له إن هو إلا ذكر وقرآن مبين لينذر من كان حيا ويحق القول على الكافرين أولم يروا أنا خلقنا لهم مما عملت أيدينا أنعاما فهم لها مالكون وذللنا لهم فمنها ركوبهم ومنها يأكلون ولهم فيها منافع ومشارب فلا يشكرون واتخذوا من دون الله آلهة لعلهم ينصرون لا يستطيعون نصرا وهم لهم جند محضرون فلا يحزنك قولهم إنا نعلم ما يسرون وما يعلنون أولم ير الإنسان أنا خلقناه من نطفة فإذا هو خصيم مبين وضرب لنا مثلا ونسي خلقه قال من يحيي العظام وهي رميم قل يحيي الذي ينشأها أول مرة وهو بكل خلق عليم الذي جعل لكم من الشجر الأخضر نارا فإذا أنتم منه توقدون أوليس الذي خلق السماوات والأرض بقادر على أن يخلق مثلهم بلى وهو الخلاق العليم إنما أمره إذا أراد شيئا أن يقول له كن فيكون فسبحان الذي بيده ملكوت كل شيء وإليه ترجعون. رحم الله من قرأ سورة مباركة الفاتحة. بسم الله.
اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. اللهم إني أسألك برحمتك التي وسعت كل شيء وبقوتك التي قهرت بها كل شيء وخضع لها كل شيء وذل لها كل شيء وبجبروتك التي غلبت بها كل شيء وبعظمتك التي لا يقوم لها شيء وبعظمتك التي ملأت كل شيء وبسلطانك الذي على كل شيء وبوجهك الباقي بعد فناء كل شيء وبأسمائك التي ملأت أركان كل شيء وبعلمك التي أحاط بكل شيء وبنور وجهك الذي أضاء له كل شيء. يا نور يا قدوس يا أول الأولين ويا آخر الآخرين. اللهم اغفر لي ذنوب التي تحتك انقسام. اللهم اغفر لي ذنوب التي تنزل النقم. اللهم اغفر لي ذنوب التي تغير النعم. اللهم اغفر لي ذنوب التي تحبس الدعاء. اللهم اغفر لي ذنوب التي تقطع الرجاء. اللهم اغفر لي ذنوب التي تنزل البلاء. اللهم اغفر لي كل ذنب أذنبته وكل خطيئة أخطأتها. اللهم إني أتقرب إليك بذكرك واستشفع بك إلى نفسك واسألك بجودك أن تدنيني من قربك وأن توزعني شكرك وأن تلهمني ذكرك. اللهم إني أسألك سؤال خاضع متذلل خاشع متضرع أن تسامحني وترحمني وتجعلني بقسمك راضيا قانعا وفي جميع الأحوال متواضعا. اللهم واسألك سؤال من اشتدت فاقته وأنزل بك عند الشدائد حاجته وعظم فيها عندك رغبته. اللهم عظم سلطانك وعلى مكانك وخفي مكرك وظهر أمرك وغلب قهرك وجهرت قدرتك ولا يمكن الفرار من حكومتك. اللهم لا أجد لذنوب غافرا ولا لقبائه ساترا ولا لشيء من عملي بالحسن مبدلا غيرك. لا إله إلا أنت سبحانك وبحمدك. ظلمت نفسي وتجرأت بجهلي وسكنت إلى قديم ذكرك لي ومنك علي. اللهم مولاي كم من قبيح سترت وكم من فادع من البلاء أقلت وكم من عثار وقيت وكم من مكروه دفعت وكم من ثناء جميل لست أهله نشرت. اللهم عظم بلائي وأفرط بي سوء حالي، وقصرت بي أعمالي، وقعدت بي أغلالي، وحبسني عن نفعي بعد أملي، وخدعتني دنيا بغرورها، ونفسي بخنايتها، ومطالي يا سيدي. فاسألك بعزتك أن لا يحب عنك دعائي سوء عملي وفعالي، ولا تفضحني بخفي ما اطلعت عليه من سري، ولا تعاجلني بالعقوبة على ما عملته في خلواتي من سوء فعلي وإساءتي ودوام تفريطي وجهالتي وكثرة شهواتي وغفلتي. وكن اللهم بعزتك لي في كل أحوال رؤوفا، وعلي في جميع الأمور العطوفا. إلهي وربي من لي خيرك، أسأله كشف ضري والنظر في أمري. إلهي ومولاي، أجريت علي حكمك أني اتبعته فيه هوى نفسي، ولم أخترس في من تزبيني عدوي، فغرني بما أهوائي، وأسعده على ذلك قضاء، فتجاوزت بما جرى علي من ذلك بعد حدودك، وخالفت بعض أوامرك، فلك الحمد علي في جميع ذلك، ولا حجة لي فيما جرى علي في قضاءك وزمني حكمك وبلاؤك. وأتيتك يا إلهي بعد تقصيري وإسرافي على نفسي، معتذرا نادما منكسرا مستقيلا مستغفرا منيبا مقرا مذعنا مغترفا، لا أجد مفر مما كان مني، ولا مفزع أتوجه إليه في أمري غير قبول عذري وإدخالك إياي في سعة رحمتك. اللهم فاقبل عذري وارحم شدة ضري، وفكني من شدي وثاق. يا رب ارحم ضعف بدني ورقة جلدي ودقة عظمي، يا من بدأ خلقي وذكري وتربيتي وبري وتغطيتي. هبني لابتداء كرمك وسالف برك بي، يا إلهي وسيدي وربي. أتراك معذبي بنارك بعد توحيدك، وبعد ما انطوى عليه قلبي من معرفتك، ولهجابه لسان من ذكرك، واعتقدوا ضميره من حبك، وبعد صدق اقترافي ودعائي خاضعا لربوبيتك. هيهات أنت أكرم من أن تضيع من ربيت، أو تبعد من أدنيت، أو تشرد من آويت، أو تسلم إلى البلاء من كسيت ورحمت. وليت شعري يا سيدي وإلهي ومولاي، أتسلط النار على وجوه خرت لعظمتك ساجدة، ولا ألسنني نطقت بتوحيدك صادقة، وبشكرك مادحة، وعلى قلوب اقترفت بإلهيتك محققة، وعلى ضمائر حوت من العلم بك حتى صارت خاشعة، وعلى جوارحه سعت إلى أوطان تعبدك طائعة، وأشارت باستغفارك مذعنا: ما هكذا لك ظن بك، ولا أخبرنا بفضلك عنك يا كريم يا ربي، وأنت تعلم ضعفي عن قليل من بلاء الدنيا وعقوباتها وما يجري فيها من المكاره على أهلها، على أن ذلك بلاء ومكروه قليل مكثه يسير البقاء قصير مدته، فكيف احتمال لبلاء الآخرة وجليل وقوع المكاره فيها، وهو بلاء تطول مدته ويدوم مقامه ولا يخفف عن أهله، لأنه لا يكون إلا عن غضبك وانتقامك وسخطك، وهذا ما لا تقوم له السماوات والأرض. يا سيدي فكيف لي وأنا عبدك الضعيف الذليل الحقير المسكين المستكين. يا إلهي وربي وسيدي ومولاي، لأي أمور إليك أشكو، ولما منها أضج وأبكي، لأليم العذاب والشدة أم لطول البلاء ومدتي؟ فلئن سيرتني لعقوبات مع أعدائك وجمعتك بين وبين أهل البلاء وأوليائك، فهبني يا إلهي وسيدي ومولاي وربي. صبرت على عذابك، فكيف أصبر على فراقك؟ وهبني يا إلهي صبرت على حر نارك، فكيف أصبر عن نظري إلى كرامتك؟ أم كيف أسكن في النار ورجاء عفوك؟ فبعزتك يا سيدي ومولاي أقسم صادقا، لئن تركتني ناطقا لأضيجن إليك بين أهلها ضجيج الآملين، ولأصرخن إليك صراخ المستصرخين، ولأبكين عليك بكاء الفاقدين، ولأنادينك أين كنت يا ولي المؤمنين، يا غاية آمال العارفين، يا غياث المستغيثين، يا حبيب القلوب الصادقين، ويا إله العالمين. أفتراك سبحانك يا إلهي وبحمدك تسمع فيها صوت عبد مسلم سجن فيها بمخالفته، وذاق طعم عذابه بمعصيته، وحبس بين أطباقها وبجرمه وجريرته، وهو يضج إليك ضجيج المؤمل لرحمتك، ويناديك بلسان أهل توحيدك، ويتوسل إليك بربوبيتك. يا مولاي كيف يبقى في عذابي وهو يرجو ما سلف من حلمك؟ أم كيف تؤلمه النار وهو يأمل فضلك ورحمتك؟ أم كيف يحرقه لهيبها وأنت تسمع صوته وترى مكانه؟ أم كي تشمل عليه زفيرها وأنت تعلم ضعفه؟ أم كيف يتقلقل بين أطباقها وأنت تعلم صدقه؟ أم كيف تزجره زبانيتها وهو يناديك يا رب؟ أم كيف يرجو فضلك في عتقه منها فتتركها فيها؟ هيهات ما ذلك الظن بك، ولا معروف من فضلك ولا مشبه لما عاملته به الموحدين من برك وإحسانك، وباليقين أقطعته لما حكمت به من تعذيب جاحديك، وقضيت به من إخلاد معاذبين. لجعلت النار كلها بردا وسلاما، وما كان لأحد فيها مقرا ولا مقاما، لكن تقدست أسماؤك أقسمت أن تملأها من الكافرين من الجنة والإنس أجمعين، وأن تخلد فيها معاذبين. وأنت جل ثناؤك قلت مبتدئا، وتطولت بالإنعام متكرما. أفمن كان مؤمنا كمن كان فاسقا لا يستوون. إلهي وسيدي، فاسألك بالقدرة التي قدرتها، وبالقضية التي حتمتها وحكمتها وغلبتها من إليه أجريتها، أن تهب لي في هذه الليلة وفي هذه الساعة كل جرم أجرمته، وكل ذنب أذنبته، وكل قبيح أسررته، وكل جهل عملت كتمته أو أعلنت، أخفيته أو أظهرت، وكل سيئة أمرت بإثباتها الكرام الكاتبين الذي وكلتهم بحفظ ما يكون مني، وجعلتهم شهودا علي مع جوارحي، وكنت أنت الرقيب علي من ورائه والشاهد لما خفي عنهم، وبرحمتك أخفيت وبفضلك سترت، وأن توفر حظي من كل خير أنزلت، أو إحسان فضلت، أو رزق بسطت، أو ذنب تغفره، أو خطأ تستره. يا ربي يا ربي يا رب، يا إلهي وسيدي ومولاي ومالك الرقي، يا من بيده ناصيتي، يا عليم بالضر ومسكنتي، يا خبير بفقري وفاقتي. يا ربي يا ربي يا رب، أسألك بحقك وقدسك وعظم صفاتك وأسمائك أن تجعل أوقات من الليل والنهار بذكرك معمورا، وبخدمتك موصولا، وأعمالي عندك مقبولة، حتى تكون أعمالي وأورادي كلها وردا واحدا، وحالي في خدمتك سرمدا. يا سيدي، يا من عليه معولي، يا من إليه شكوت أحوالي، يا ربي يا ربي يا رب، قوي على خدمتك جواري، واشدد على العزيمة جوانحي، وهب لي الجد في خشيتك والدوام في الاتصال بخدمتك، حتى أسرح إليك في ميادين السابقين، وأسرع إليك من بارزين، واشتاق إلى قربك في مشتاقين، وادن منك ذنوب المخلصين، وأخافك مخافة الموقنين، واجتمع في جوارك مع المؤمنين. اللهم ومن أرادني بسوء فارده، ومن كادني فكده، واجعلني من أحسن عبيدك نصيبا عندك، وأقربهم منزلة منك، وأخصمهم زلفة لديك، فإنه لا ينال ذلك إلا بفضلك. وجد لي بجودك، واعطف علي بمجدك، واحفظني برحمتك، واجعل لساني بذكرك لهجا، وقلبي بحبك متيما، ومن علي بحسن إجابتك، وأقلني عثرتي، واغفر زلتي، فإنك قضيت على عبادك بعبادك، وأمرتهم بدعائي، وضمنت لهم الإجابة. فإليك يا ربي نصبت وجهي، وإليك يا ربي مددت يدي، وبعزتك استجب لي دعائي، وبلغني مناي، ولا تقطعوا من فضلك رجائي، واكفني شر الجن والإنس من أعدائي. يا سريع الرضا، اغفر لمن لا يملك إلا الدعاء، فإنك فعال لما تشاء. يا من اسمه الدعاء، وذكره الشفاء، وطاعته الغنى، ارحم من رأس ماله الرجاء، وسلاحه البكاء. يا سابغ النعم، يا دافع النقم، يا نور المستوحشين في الظلم، يا عالما لا يعلم، صل على محمد وآل محمد، وافعل بي ما أنت أهله. وصلى الله على رسوله والأئمة الميامين من آله وسلم تسليما كثيرا. اللهم صل على محمد.
صلوا على النبी। आ गई ज़ैनब मदीने में, बपा को हराम है। आज कब्रे मुस्तफ़ा पर एक हुजूम आम है। आज कब्रे मुस्तफ़ा पर एक हुजूम आम है। करबला के वाक़े को एक मुद्दत हो गई। करबला के वाक़े को एक मुद्दत हो गई। सैयदे सज्जाद के आँखों में फिर भी शाम है। आ गई زینب مدینے میں بپا کوہرام ہے. کہتے تھے فضا چھنی جاتی ہے زینب کی ردا. کہتے تھے فضا چھنی جاتی ہے زینب کی ردا. یا علی آو مدد کو یہ تمہارا کام ہے. آ گئی زینب مدینے میں بپا کوہرام ہے. نام بر کولا شبیٹے کی دکھا کر بول شاہ. نام بر کولا شبیٹے کی دکھا کر بول شاہ. یہ ہے سہرا کی تمنا اس کا اکبر نام ہے. آ گئی زینب مدینے میں بپا کوہرام ہے. بیردا زینب ہے سورج آج کیوں چھپتا نہیں. بیردا زینب ہے سورج آج کیوں چھپتا نہیں. وہ مدینہ تھا نبی کا یہ دیار شام ہے. آ گئی زینب مدینے میں بپا کوہرام ہے. زینب مزتر کے ایک دل پر 72 داغ ہے. زینب مزتر کے ایک دل پر 72 داغ ہے. حاضر دربار ہونا موت کا پیغام ہے. آ گئی زینب مدینے میں بپا کوہرام ہے. کربلا کے واقعے کو ایک मुद्दत हो गई। करबला के वाक़े को एक मुद्दत हो गई। सैयदे सज्जाद के आँखों में फिर भी शाम है। आ गई ज़ैनब मदीने में बपा को राम है। आज कब्रे मुस्तफ़ा पर एक हुजूम आम है। आज कब्रे मुस्तफ़ा पर व मोहम्मद व आल मोहम्मद सल्लल्लाहु।
A'udhu billahi minash shaitanir rajeem. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Sayyid Shabbir Kirmani, respected elders, brothers and sisters, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Surah Al-Fatiha is requested for the Isal Sawab of Marhumeen listed on the screen and for all Marhumeen. Al-Fatiha. Bismillah. Hayy Yujib is requested for the names listed on the screen and for all those in need here and elsewhere. Let us recite together. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Amman yujibul muttarra idha da'ah wa yakshifu as-su'. Amman yujibul muttarra idha da'ah wa yakshifu as-su'. عمن يجيب المضطر إذا دعاه ويكشف السوء عمن يجيب المضطر إذا دعاه ويكشف السوء عمن يجيب المضطر إذا دعاه ويكشف السوء اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. The Zainabiyya program will start from tomorrow, Friday, September 24th, till Tuesday, September 28th. Majlis will be recited by Sheikh Fayaz Jafar on the various topics seen on the screen. We look forward to seeing all of you here, inshallah. The Zainabiyya Ladies program will start next week from Saturday, September 25th. This week from Saturday from September 25th till Monday, September 27th, inshallah. Majlis will be recited by Zakira Sabah Bimani on the topic of Hussein ibn Ali, the inheritor of the Prophets. Please note that the timings of the program as shown on the screen and sent on the newsletter. Masjid Hayy is pleased to announce the Arba'een walk once again this year on Monday, September 27th, starting at 7 p.m. It is a way to revive the generosity of our Imam locally and to inspire all of us who are unable to go for Imam Hussein Ziyarat but can serve our community here. This year, we would like to encourage the young Zawars of our community to make posters of what they have learned from Imam Hussein alayhi salam and his family. These posters can be art showcasing lessons for their lives or can even display words of wisdom that they have imparted to us. If you'd like to volunteer or donate, please contact Sister Noshina Khaki or Sister Minaz Manekia. Thank you again to all our sponsors for their generous support. Alhamdulillah, we've reached 80% of our target of $76,500 for the Muharram and Safar fund. Please donate generously. We again suggest a donation of $200 per family. However, any amount is welcome. To make a contribution, please contact Brother Murtaza Karim or Sister Batul Mukhi as shown on the screen. At this time, I would like to invite Sayyid Shabbir to come recite tonight's majlis with a loud salawat ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad.
صل على محمد. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان اللعين الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. فوض أمري إلى الله إن الله بصير بالعباد ولا حول ولا قوة إلا بالله العلي العظيم. حسبنا الله ونعم الوكيل ونعم المولى ونعم النصير. والصلاة والسلام والتحية والإكرام على الرسول المسدد المصطفى الأمجد المحمود الأحمد الذي سمي في السماء بأحمد وفي الأرض بأبي القاسم محمد. اللهم صل على محمد وعلى أهل بيت الطيبين الطاهرين المعصومين المظلومين المنتجبين الذين أذهب الله عنهم الرجس وطهرهم تطهيرا. اللهم صل على محمد. وقل رب اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقهوا قولي. أما بعد، قال الله تبارك وتعالى في كتاب الكريم: بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. أم حسبت أن أصحاب الكهف والرقيم كانوا من آياتنا عجبا. صدق الله العلي العظيم. زينوا مجالسكم بالصلوات على محمد وآل محمد. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. My respected elders, brothers and sisters in Iman here in Florida, across the globe, wherever you're hearing my voice, Salamun alaikum jami'an wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Question: how should one live? If we come to our modern world, there are many questions that we face as human beings. And many questions that used to be answered by religion or other forces of spirituality in our world are no longer able to be answered. Many people are looking for answers to these big questions of life. What's the meaning of life? What's the purpose of life? Why am I here? What am I supposed to do with my life? How should I live my life? And with the decline of religion in modern society, we're noticing an environment where, because of this, people are feeling empty inside. Now, not everything is bad. There's also silver linings that I want to share with you. For example, studies have shown one of the silver linings of COVID, despite all the challenges, despite all of the difficulties, despite all of the lives lost, there's a silver lining even there. In fact, in America, research and studies have shown that during the period of COVID, Christians have reported that they have increased their participation in religious gatherings by approximately 24%. So people are turning to religion. In the Christian Baptist community, they have increased their participation in religious events by 57%. And mashallah, in the Muslim community in America, research is showing that the Muslim community has increased their participation in religious gatherings by almost 70%. So people are turning to religion in these difficult times, so that's a good sign and a good indication. But there's also a double edge to this sword. What is that? Many people in the Christian congregations have gotten very used to online programming via Zoom and other metrics and other methods. And many of them are saying, when the churches open up again, we don't feel the need to go back physically. That's something we need to be cautious of, because there's an element of community, there's an element of camaraderie, there's an element of lining up, for example, in the saf, in the lines of salah, of prayer, to realize there was a symbolism behind that, to look at the person left and right, in front of you, behind you, that you are a sense or a piece, a part of something bigger than yourself. You are the part of a community. And we must make sure we don't lose that. Having said this, tonight, Thursday night, is a night to reflect on the message of Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam. It is a time, especially in Ayyam Azza, as we come to the nights of Zainabiyah, to reflect on the message of Sayyidah Zainab and Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam, but also to remember our marhumeen. And it gives us a moment, as we said, it is the night before Jum'ah, a moment for us to reflect on our lives in terms of what is the trajectory of our lives, what is the direction of our life. Is our life, the ship of our life, is it sailing in the right direction, or is it sailing in such a direction that in my final moments on my deathbed, perhaps I have regret? We should reflect tonight and every night, is the trajectory of our ship of life going in the right direction or not? And if it's not going in the right direction, how can I correct it to make sure it goes in the right direction? I'm not saying to get to the right destination. Before to get to the right destination, you and I need to make sure that we have the right direction. Our compass, our navigation is aligned with the appropriate direction. Is it or is it not? What's the meaning of life? Is it simply to get more and more? Is it simply to gain income? Is it simply to spend it on a nicer car, a nicer house? Although all of those things may have their place. But believe me, the research shows that in itself will not get you happiness. That will not get you contentment. That will not get you satisfaction. That will not fill the void in your heart that you may be feeling. So the question is, what does? And what guidance can we learn therein? Therefore, in the brief moments that we have together, I want to look at a few things. Number one, what is the wisdom of the verses that Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam was reciting in the bazaar of Kufa? What were those verses? And why those verses? And what lesson do we learn? That if we spend the entire life analyzing them, they would perhaps not be enough. Number two, what was the history of that year in which this chapter was revealed and the other chapters? What is it that we can understand by the revelation of these chapters in the year? What other chapters were revealed so that we can get guidance for our world today? What is something at the third level? What is something that you and I can do while we're alive in this world so that even after we're gone, we will be smiling and our future generations will be smiling? And that we know that in the afterworld we can have some solace. And finally, how did the movement of Imam Hussein and Sayyidah Zainab allow us to understand how to live the verses of these chapters of the Quran? And how they give us guidance today. And finally, the zikr of the musibah of Ali Muhammad in these nights especially, to revive the hearts. Because that is a dawa and a shifa in and of itself. This is our agenda for the brief moments that we have together, wherever you are. Here in Florida, across the globe. Send a salawat on Muhammad wa Ali Muhammad. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. At the first level, as I've been mentioning to you in weeks past as well, that according to the narrations, the blessed head of Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam in the bazaar of Kufa is on a spear, and at that moment he gives a mu'jiza, an i'jaz, a miracle, a karama, one which is not seen. Imam did not use a major miracle throughout Karbala. It was not until this moment in time. Yes, smaller things here and there. But the Imam did not use miracle or ijaz for water, although he could have had that in a moment. There's a wisdom in this that Allah wanted him to recite the verse of the Quran on the spear, but which verse is the verse of Surah Al-Kahf? What wisdom is this chapter giving us? This chapter came in a year for us to understand and reflect on. That hardships will come. Ashab al-Kahf went through hardships. Will you and I go through hardships? Indeed we will. Allah says in the Quran time and time again. The question is, what are we doing through those hardships? Are we just folding under those pressures or not? Each and everyone has a test. Everyone here, everyone hearing my voice has a test. That is, someone's test may be losing a loved one. Someone's test may be health. Someone's test may be wealth. Someone may have a test and not even realize they have a test. You may say, how? Sometimes Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said, we've given wealth to people and that is a test for them. And they think they're accumulating and accumulating and accumulating, although that's a test for them. Because Allah has kept you as a custodian for other people's wealth. Are you distributing it to them or not? So sometimes we have a test, we don't even know it's a test. Therefore, when we come to the verses of Surah Kahf, but not only Surah Kahf, there's other chapters that you and I need to reflect on. Why? Because in the same year, 3 individuals came to the rabbis outside of Mecca towards Medina, and they asked 5 questions that they wanted to ask Rasulullah, that they wanted to ask what they said was Muhammad, so we can ask him and he doesn't have the answers. Nadhr bin Haris and the likes. And for example, all these individuals, or As ibn Wa'il, these individuals. These people came and said, we want some questions. So what were the questions? Who did Musa go and meet? For example, this was one of the questions. Who were those youth who went at a certain time and they had belief, but they needed to protect themselves and the environment around them was not good? Who was the ruler who went from east to west? He went east and west. Who was that? And how is it that Yaqub, his generation, Yaqub was from Palestine. How did his generations end up in Misr, in Egypt? How is that possible? And finally, ask what is Ruh? This was the fifth question, of which Allah gave four answers. The fifth, he said, قُلِ الرُّوحُ أَمْرِ رَبِّي. The Ruh is an amr from Allah. He didn't give that answer. He said, just know that's from Allah. At that point in time, what is the wisdom that this chapter was revealed? Surah Kahf gave the answer to the first three. Surah Yusuf gave the answer to the fourth. And in that same year was revealed Surah Ankabut. Never forget these chapters. Surah Kahf, Surah Yusuf, Surah Ankabut. These were happening at a time where there was a media war that was taking place between the Meccans and the early Muslims. You see, what was happening to the early Muslims at that time and what is happening today is very similar. Because the characters change, but the dilemmas and the challenges are the same. At one moment, in the beginning, they used to make fun of the Muslims. Then they began to fight the Muslims. First, through media war, policy wars, through economic sanctions, in Shabbir Abi Talib, for example. So what happened? So they would ask these questions. In Surah Kahf, we realize and we get some guidance. In Surah Yusuf, we get some guidance. In Surah Ankabut, we also get guidance. All of them talks about different challenges. In Surah Kahf, at a broader scheme, Allah is saying, you may be tried and tested by your community, by the society around you. The same way Ashab al-Kahf were. The 7 people and their dog that were in the cave, they were tried by their community and their society around them. When you come to Nabi Yusuf and the story of Yusuf, he was tried by his own brothers, his own siblings. And when you come to Ankabut, Allah says you may even be tried by your own parents. It doesn't get closer than that. The question is, what will you do in that environment? You see, we live in a world and an environment and a time where people say, if I don't do this, someone else will. If I don't take your property, someone else will. If I don't take your land, someone else will. If I don't benefit from this, someone else will. What will you and I do in that circumstance? All of these chapters give us guidance. When the rabbi said, ask this question, for example, in Surah Yusuf, they said, before Surah Yusuf was revealed, they said, how is it that when you look at the lineage of Yaqub, how did it end up in Palestine, or from Palestine into Misr? Yusuf, his father is Yaqub. Yaqub, who we call Yaqub in the Bible is known as Jacob, his other name was, he was a descendant of who? Let's look at the family lines. If you look at Father Abraham, starting from Ibrahim, in the Christian narrative, the Jewish narrative, as well as in Islam, all of them go back to Father Ibrahim or Abraham. From that, according to the narrations, there were 2 sons, Ismail or Ishmael and Ishaq or Isaac. According to the Jewish and the Christian narrative, Isaac is through that line. Isaac is the line through which the continuation happened. According to the Muslim narrative, it's Ismail who gave the test with Nabi Ibrahim. Nonetheless, when you come to this, you realize that it was, according to the narrations, Ibrahim. Under that, there was a son Ishaq. One of the sons was Ishaq, one was Ismail. Ishaq had a son by the name of Yaqub. Yaqub is also known as Israel. That's where you get Banu Israel from. Yaqub, Jacob, is known as Israel. His line is known as Banu Israel. How did Banu Israel end up in Egypt? Then Allah revealed the entirety of Surah Yusuf and gave that answer. But here's the clue and here's the key. Allah said we give qasas, ahsan al-qasas in the case of Surah Yusuf, and in the case of Surah Kahf we gave a story. But Allah was not telling them stories. He was telling the people, the early Muslims, the people before you went through heavy trials, you will also go through heavy trials. But don't lose your iman. Don't lose your faith. Be strong and be firm and be steadfast in every environment. Allah has given you gifts. Allah has given you abilities in order to succeed in these environments. And people in the early times had this belief. For example, who? For example, Abdullah ibn Mas'ud. Abdullah ibn Mas'ud was a companion of Rasulullah who had a lot of love for the Ahlul Bayt. Abdullah ibn Mas'ud, during the time of the 3rd Khalifa, he was beaten for one statement that he gave in the Masjid. What did he say? You talk about during Rasulullah's time there was freedom of speech. After Rasulullah, during the time of the second and third Khalifa, and especially freedom of speech went to the side. So what did Abdullah ibn Mas'ud say? He had said one statement. He said when he saw a practice being done during the reign of Uthman, he said that I did not see anything like this being done during the time of Rasulullah. When he said this statement, they beat him and beat him and beat him so much that he was wounded. When he went wounded, and this would happen, some of these rulers, they had a ridiculous rage. And if you read the history, you see this pattern over and over again. And then afterwards, when they beat him, he went home. When he went home, afterwards, a moment in time came where he felt regret, the Khalifa. He went back and he said, Abdullah bin Mas'ud, I apologize, I should not have done that. Let me give you some money. Abdullah bin Mas'ud said, I don't want any of your money till I go. I have no interest in your wealth whatsoever. He said, okay, perhaps I can give you some money for your daughters. His daughters had not been married. They can get married, some help, some finance, not for you, for your children. Look at the principle. He said, my daughters have no need for your wealth. They are wealthy. I said, wealthy? You live in a simple place. What are you talking about? He says, I have heard. He says, what will happen after you die? He says, they are well taken care of. You have nothing to worry about. He said, what is it? Abdullah bin Mas'ud said, because I have heard from Rasulullah that the one who recites Surah Waqi'ah every night before they go to sleep, they will never be in need of anyone, nor will they have to spread their hands in front of anyone else to ask for anything. Look at the yaqeen of Abdullah bin Mas'ud. He says, I have no need for your wealth. I have no need for your money. In fact, your money may become a bigger problem for me. Those people in early Islam, the taqwa, the piety, to be able to go through those difficulties and still have the trust in Allah and His Word. That I don't need your money, I have Surah Waqi'ah, Allah will provide for me. Principle that comes forward to us at every moment in time. Do you and I understand? Do we have trust in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala or not? What is it that is the legacy that we're leaving for our children down the line? That when we are gone from this world on Thursday nights, will they remember us? And if they do remember us, what do they remember about us? Let's go back to this same Surah Kahf. When we go back to this same Surah Kahf, the very famous event, the 3 stories that are narrated in Surah Kahf is the story of Ashab al-Kahf, is the story of Musa and Khidr, and the story of Dhul Qarnayn. But these are not stories, these are guides for life. Ashab al-Kahf is one level. What happens in Musa and Khidr? Very famously. I'm reminding very quickly. When Musa and Khidr go, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says to Musa, وَوَجَدَكَ عَبْدًا مِّنْ عِبَادِنَا, go and find from amongst my servants one who has more knowledge than you. He goes and finds Khidr. And Khidr tells him that you will not have the patience to be with me. Now hold on a second. There's big questions here that we need to analyze. Number one, at that moment, Musa, in the story of Musa and Khidr, not once, not twice, 3 times he forgets. How can a ma'soom, how can a prophet forget? The ulama have answered these things. I'm raising these questions that you and I need to think about. And 3 times he says he'll do something, but he doesn't. So I'll be patient. Doesn't. What's the wisdom here? Because ulama, very quickly, I don't have time to go into depths, but Musa had control of the zahir. Khidr had control of the batin. That is the unseen, the unapparent. That's why Allah made a relationship between Khidr and the Imam of our time. In fact, the narrations say, according to the Ahlul Bayt, that Allah did not even create Khidr except for Imam Sahib al-Zaman. So that people do not say that how is the Mahdi alive? How is Sahib al-Zaman alive? Whereas Khidr has been alive for so many years more. Nonetheless, Musa and Khidr go. When they finally go at the first level, they get to a place where they see a boat. And when they see a boat, Khidr drills a hole into this perfectly fine boat. When he drills the hole, he says, you drilled a hole in a perfectly fine boat? How could you do this? He said, didn't I tell you can't be patient? He said, sorry, I apologize. I will remain patient. They go further at that point in time. And they go through the whole narration. And to the point where he finishes off one of the youth. He said, how could you do this? And then he comes to another moment where they go to a town. And in that town, the people were not the most hospitable, but they fix a wall. And at that time, Musa again objects. The very famous story that you know. And at that point in time, he says, هَذَا فِرَاقٌ بَيْنِي وَبَيْنِكَ. This is the point where you go your way, I go my way. Musa and Khidr. Khidr says to Musa. At that point in time, when this conversation ensues, he says, look, with respect to the boat, Musa, you don't know this, I'm telling you why I did what I did. This tells us there's two parallel worlds. There's the world of the Zahir and the world of the Batin. We don't always know what's going on. He says, look, with respect to the boat, there's a ruler who was taking over people's boats. Or if he didn't, he would burn it. If he saw a hole in this, he would leave it. I knew that the owner of the boat can easily patch and fix up this boat. So I drilled this hole. It was not to cause them damage. It was to save them damages. He says, very well, I didn't know. Okay. He says, with respect to the young one, the youth, this one was going to be the cause of his parents becoming apostates and leaving the religion of God. And Allah would replace them with another. The ulama have given a long discussion on this particular part and aspect. And it's a very interesting one. Another time, inshallah. Just take it for what it is. At the next level. And then they come, you fixed a wall for people who are not the most hospitable to us. He said, yes, under this wall was the property of some orphans. And I fixed it so that their wall could protect the treasure that was underneath, because everyone in this town was in a famine. They were starving. So do you think they would leave this money? No, they would ransack and take it, and those orphans would not get their money. But here's the line and why I went through this entire narration to you, and why I wanted to mention. وَكَانَ أَبُوهُمْ صَالِحًا. That the Quran said that this one, their father was a righteous person. Their father was salih, was a pious person. And therefore, Khidr made the appropriations for his children's items to be taken care of. The question is, when you and I leave this world, will we be remembered as salih or not? That's a big question that you and I need to remember. Allow me to explain. Agha Mehdi Taj, he was an alim, a zakir in Iran, a well-renowned khatib, an orator, about 60 years ago. You know, these big reciters and orators of the time, you know, they'd get invited everywhere, for example. And when they'd get invited, they would be invited from one place to the other. Many of the elders may remember Mullah Asghar, for example. If he came to America, he's reciting everywhere, he's reciting here, there, in Africa and things of this nature. So one time, Agha Mehdi Taj, 60 years ago, he says, I was invited to Mazandaran province in Iran to recite. When I was reciting in the city center of Mazandaran, the majalises of Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam, normally you would get an invitation from nearby villages. So there was one village nearby that said, Agha Mehdi Taj, we have one majlis of Imam Hussein every year in our village. It's a very small village, it's a very remote village. Can you please bless us with your honor and your presence to recite the majlis of Imam Hussein? Agha Mehdi Taj says, you know, I said I was very busy, but I made the time and I said I will accommodate and I will join you for your majlis, inshallah. When the day came, they said, Agha, come with us. He said, very well. So they used the transportation of the time, wherever they could use vehicles. At that time, the train, then the vehicle. But at some point, it got remote. So then they had to go on a mule. When they're going on a mule, they're going for some distance. After they go for some distance, they stop and they say, Agha Mehdi Taj, the mule cannot even go further on this. You now have to walk and climb and hike. He said, very well, okay. They got off the mule. Then he's hiking and he's going through this very difficult terrain and land. Agha Mehdi Taj said, I'm starting to feel soreness in my body. Where is this place? It's in the middle of nowhere. He says, up until the point that they said, it's just a little bit further down. He said, I'm exhausted. He said, at that point in time, when I finally got to where there was a straight path, they said, just a few more blocks and then you'll get to the Husainiya, the Imam Barga, where the majlis is. He said, by the time I got there, I was so exhausted, I was barely able to recite the majlis. He said, nonetheless, I recited the majlis. And then I went back to the main majlis, and then I went back home. He said, the next year I came back to Mazandaran. When I came back to Mazandaran, they invited me, the same community, the same remote village invited me again. He said, now, when I went last time, Agha Mehdi Taj says, when I went last year, it took me such difficulty to get to the place. 5 days afterwards, I was not able to recite any more majalis because the soreness kicked in. I finished the majalis in Mazandaran. Then 1-2 days later, the soreness in my body, I couldn't move. I didn't want to do this again. It was very difficult, and I didn't have the energy to recite. It was very difficult physically to go do this. Agha Mehdi then said, I tried to apologize and excuse myself, but then I thought to myself, what if, on the Day of Judgment, someone asks me, Ali Muhammad asks me, that, was the zikr of Ali Muhammad only for the elites? Was it only for the wealthy, that you can't go to a small village? The scholars of the past used to think like this. He said, no, I said, I will come. Inshallah, I will come. I will make it. The next day they came. They said, Agha Mehdi, this is the day of the Majlis. He says, very well, let's go. So they took the transportation all the way. When they got to that place where it was the difficulty of going, Agha Mehdi said, I ended up on the mimbar and I didn't realize. He said that this was the smoothest path. He said, what happened? There was no donkey this time, there was no hiking, nothing. I went straight and walked straight to the Husainiya and straight gave the majlis. He said, yes. They said, Agha, this paved path, last year somebody heard your majlis, they came forward and they built a path. They sold their land and they built a paved path for everyone to be able to benefit. Agha Mehdi was energetic. He gave a perfect, beautiful majlis of Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam. When he gave the majlis of Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam, he got down from the mimbar. They were sitting, they had a sufra to eat, to sit down. He sat down. Agha Mehdi said, who's that person who built this path, this paved path? What happened? Invite him, call him. They called him. He came, sat down with them. Salamu alaikum wa alaikum assalam. He said, you're the man, he was an elderly man. He said, you built this paved path? He said, may Allah bless you. This is sadaqah jariyah. It helps so many people to come and go. He said, why? Why did you do this? He said, I heard your majlis last year and something that you said impacted me so much, I realized that I must do something for my life. He said, what was it? He said, I am someone who's a landowner. I have many lands. And I was hoping and planning that I would leave all of my land for my children afterwards. He said, but when I heard your majlis, everything changed. He said, what happened? He said, you mentioned 2 rulers of Banu Umayyah. And my eyes opened in a way they've never opened. He said, which ones? Do you remember? He said, yes. He said, you mentioned Hisham and Umar ibn Abdul Aziz, 2 rulers of Banu Umayyah. And what they did when they died. And you said that Harun al-Abbasi, the first Abbasid ruler, and you said, what did he ask and what nasiha did he get? And now I'm continuing from there. Harun al-Abbasi, sometimes these rulers, they didn't have much love for Ahlul Bayt or any goodness in their heart, but sometimes even they would want nasiha, guidance, some advice. So Harun al-Abbasi, who's a few years afterwards, after Hisham and Umar ibn Abdul Aziz, he called one of his advisors, his wazirs. He said, give me some advice. At that point in time, the wazir said, I will give you the advice as follows. He said there was 2 rulers of Banu Umayyah. He said Hisham and Umar ibn Abdul Aziz. Umar ibn Abdul Aziz is the one who gave Fadak back, and he's also the one who stopped the la'an and the cursing on Imam Ali. He's called Umar the second. He didn't give back the seat to the Ahlul Bayt, that's different, but he did these 2 things. Nonetheless, at that point in time, Harun al-Abbasi's advisor is saying that Hisham had 10 sons and Umar ibn Abdul Aziz had 10 sons. Both of them had 10 sons. Hisham was first, that Umar ibn Abdul Aziz. He said Hisham had given each one of his sons in inheritance 1 million dirham. 1 million dirham at that time is a lot of money. He says 1 million dirham to each of his sons. And then Umar ibn Abdul Aziz gave 2 dirham to each of his sons as inheritance. Both of them were rulers. The advisor says, I saw with my own eyes that Hisham's sons, who were millionaires, who had been left with 1 million, they were begging. Just a few years later, they were begging in the masjid for money. And this same Umar ibn Abdul Aziz, his sons who had been left with 2 dirham only, when there came time for donations, they were collecting from the Muslim Ummah, only just one of Umar ibn Abdul Aziz's sons gave 1,000 horses in charity and 100,000 dirham in charity. He said, I realized that what really lasts in someone is the goodness that they do. And by the way, in our modern world, many people, such as Warren Buffett, such as Bill Gates and others, they, although they are multi-billionaires, they have capped how much they will give to their kids. You don't want to give, as they say, you don't want to give them so much, you don't want to give them so little that they have big problems in their life, and you don't want to give them so much that they have nothing to do in life. Both are big problems. So what was the principle here? Umar ibn Abdul Aziz, although there were many problems with him, there was some good, and that good lasted, that his kids were not begging in the streets anymore. Sometimes when you do this, it corrupts. So what is your legacy? How should one live? One should live in a way that your life is such a life that it gives life to others. Your akhlaq, your manners, your morals, that is what will last. That's why Musa and Khidr fixed the door, because their father, the wall, their father was a good person. Similarly, will we be remembered as a good person or not? Why? Because today, in the Middle East, if you go to the Middle East, there's some people who are moving from Nubsha, Talha and Zubair. But when Imam Ali cornered Zubair, Zubair left the battlefield. His son Abdullah was decent. When Imam Hussein is leaving from Karbala, from Medina towards Karbala, Abdullah ibn Zubair comes to meet him in Medina. He says, I have heard, do you know that I have heard from your grandfather that there will be a battle in Karbala and there will be a sacrifice in Karbala? Imam Hussein looks back at Abdullah ibn Zubair and he says a line to never forget. He says, Abdullah, you don't think that you've heard this and you don't think Rasulullah would have told me, his own grandson? You think you know this and I don't know this? At that point in time, will you go? Imam Hussein says, yes, I will go. Will you join me? Join me. Abdullah ibn Zubair, he says, can I see one thing? He said, yes. He says, come here. They come closer. He says, can you open the button of your shirt? He opens the button of his shirt. Abdullah ibn Zubair kisses the neck or the chest of Aba Abdullah and he cries. And he says, this is where Rasulullah used to kiss. He's showing his love, his compassion, affection. He turns around and leaves. He doesn't join Imam Hussein. That his lips and his actions are showing one thing, but he's not joining the movement of Imam Hussein. Further than this, the narrations say that on the night after Ashura, right after Ashura, at the Asr of Ashura, after Imam Hussein has been martyred, a person goes and loots into the tents. Hamid ibn Muslim says, he's looting the tents of Imam Hussein, and he's stealing and he's crying while he's looting the tents of Imam Hussein. They asked, why are you crying while you're looting the tents? He says, I'm looting this, I'm crying because this is the family of Rasulullah. What a difficult environment has come on Rasulullah's family that they are being looted. So he said, why are you looting them? He says, I'm doing it because if I don't, someone else will. You see, this principle that has become common in our world was going on at that time. Principle is what matters in life. Their actions were not aligned with their words. Ajrukum ala Allah. We turn our hearts and minds to Karbala. 2 moments. These are the ayyam of Sayyidah Zainab. These are the ayyam of Bibi Sakina. These are the ayyam of Sayyidul Sajideen. Ajrukum ala Allah. There are narrations say that there was one person who was so close to the heart of Imam al-Husayn alayhi salam. And that was that individual who Imam al-Husayn alayhi salam in Salatul Layl, Namaz al-Shab, he would raise his hands and ask for dua for. Who was that? That was a 4-year-old daughter. May Allah protect your children. Ajrukum ala Allah. The narrations say that Bibi Sakina or Sukaina, or as she's also known, Ruqayya, she would cry so much in the Zindan, in the prison of Sham. And she would cry so much to the point that the narrations say that no one would be able to make her quiet. At some point in time, the crying reached the ear of Yazid. When the crying reached the ear of the Yazid, he said, why is this girl crying? He said that she misses her father. At that point point in time, he said, then send the head of the father. And when he said this, at that moment in time, they sent the head of Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam in a tray. But moment in time, she is about to see something. What is she about to see? They said, oh Sakina, this is not food. They removed the cloth. What did Bibi Sakina see? She saw the head of Sayyid al-Shuhada. She hugged the head and she said, Baba, who has severed your neck? Baba, why is there blood coming from your head? Baba, why are your lips so dry you didn't get water? Baba, who broke your teeth? Imam Sahib al-Zaman in Ziyarat al-Nahya, he says, salam on my Jad, salam on my grandfather, whose teeth were broken with a rod. Ajrukum ala Allah. Ajrukum ala Allah. Bibi Sakina, she cried so much up until a moment in time where the narration say Bibi Zainab said, when Bibi Sakina became quiet, Imam Sajjad was there. Bibi Zainab said, Sajjad, check your sister. Why has she become quiet? At that moment Imam Sajjad went. He saw his sister. He said, Inna lillah wa inna ilayhi raji'un. My aunt, my sister has left this world. Azadaro ajrukum alallah. Ek jumla arz karunga. Jab rehayi mili, jab aale Muhammad zindane Sham se reha hue, Bibi Zainab sabko ikhatta kar rahi thi, sare बीबियों को और सारे बच्चों को. अब आले मोहम्मद जिंदाने शाम से रवाना हो रहे हैं, मगर एक बीबी नजर नहीं आ रही. क्या ये बीबी कहाँ है? बीबी ज़ैनब ने कहा, मैं अभी आती हूँ. बीबी ज़ैनब गई. एक कब्र थी जिंदाने शाम में, रबाब लिपट गई. क्या सकीना रिहाई मिली. सल्लल्लाहु अलैका या रसूल अल्लाह, सल्लल्लाहु अलैका या अमीर अल-मुमिनीन, सल्लल्लाहु अलैकी या फातिमत अज़-ज़हरा सय्यदत अन-निसा अल-आलमीन, सल्लल्लाहु अलैका या हसन अल-मुज्तबा. अस्सलामु अला अल-हुसैन व अला अली इब्न अल-हुसैन وعلى أولاد الحسين وعلى أصحاب الحسين. ماتم حسين يا حسين يا حسين.
Ya Hussein, Ya Hussein,
Ya Hussein, Ya Hussein, Ya Hussein, Ya Hussein, Hussein, Ya Hussein, Ya Hussein. पाबंद ना हो आए, हाय पाबंद ना हो आए, रोने पे न पहरा हो या रब कोई मासूमा, जिंदा में न तन्हा हो या रब कोई मासूमा, जिंदा में न तन्हा हो या रब कोई मासूमा, जिंदा में न तन्हा हो. थी जिसको नींद आती शबीर के सीने पर, थी जिसको नींद आती शबीर के सीने पर, जिंदा दर जिंदा है जिंदा दर जिंदा, उसके लिए कज़ा हो या रब कोई मासूमा, जिंदा में न तन्हा हो या रब कोई मासूमा, जिंदा में न तन्हा हो या रब कोई मासूमा, जिंदा में न तन्हा हो. زندانوں سے آتی تھی آواز سسکنے کی، زندانوں سے آتی تھی آواز سسکنے کی، جیسے کہ سکینہ کو، ہائے جیسے کہ سکینہ کو ہر زندان رو رہا ہو، یا رب کوئی معصومہ زندہ میں نہ تنہا ہو، یا رب کوئی معصومہ زندہ میں نہ تنہا ہو، یا رب کوئی معصومہ زندہ میں نہ تنہا ہو۔ ٹکرائے نہ وہ کیوں کر زندہ کی دیواروں سے، ٹکرائے نہ وہ کیوں کر زندہ کی دیواروں سے، بھائی سے اور پھوپھی سے، ہائے بھائی سے اور پھوپھی سے، جس کو جدا کیا ہو، یا رب کوئی معصومہ زندہ میں نہ تنہا ہو، یا رب کوئی معصومہ زندہ میں نہ تنہا ہو۔ زندان میں اے نجفی یاد آئی سکینہ کی، زندانوں میں اے نجفی یاد آئی سکینہ کی، دل رو رو کہہ رہا ہے، اے دل رو رو کہہ رہا ہے، اب نہ اجالا ہو، یا رب کوئی معصومہ زندہ میں نہ تنہا ہو، یا رب کوئی معصومہ زندہ میں نہ تنہا ہو، یا رب کوئی معصومہ زندہ میں نہ تنہا ہو۔ یا رب حق کے زہرا توفیق یہ عطا ہو، مرنے سے پہلے یا رب دیدار کربلا ہو، یا رب حق کے زہرا توفیق یہ عطا ہو، مرنے سے پہلے یا رب دیدار کربلا ہو۔ جو عرض کربلا ہے ہر عرض سے سوا ہے، اس خاک کربلا میں شہ کا لہو ملا ہے، شہ کا لہو ملا ہے، ہر لا دوا مرض کی یہ خاک ہی دوا ہو، مرنے سے پہلے یا رب دیدار کربلا ہو، یا رب حق کے زہرا توفیق یہ عطا ہو، مرنے سے پہلے یا رب دیدار کربلا ہو۔ میں بھی تو ماتمی ہوں، ذاکر حسین ادا کا نوحہ پڑا ہے میں نے، ہم شکل مصطفیٰ کا، ہم شکل مصطفیٰ کا، اس ذاکری کا میری قسمت سے یہ صلہ ہو، مرنے سے پہلے یا رب دیدار کربلا ہو، یا رب حق کے زہرا توفیق یہ عطا ہو، مرنے سے پہلے یا رب دیدار کربلا ہو، یا رب حق کے زہرا توفیق یہ عطا ہو، مرنے سے پہلے یا رب دیدار کربلا ہو۔ محمد وآل محمد وآل محمد۔
توجه زيارة إن شاء الله. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. السلام عليك يا وارث آدم صفوة الله. السلام عليك يا وارث نوح نبي الله. السلام عليك يا وارث إبراهيم خليل الله. السلام عليك يا وارث موسى كليم الله. السلام عليك يا وارث عيسى روح الله. السلام عليك يا وارث محمد حبيب الله. السلام عليك يا وارث علي أمير المؤمنين ولي الله. السلام عليك يا ابن محمد المصطفى. السلام عليك يا ابن علي المرتضى. السلام عليك يا ابن فاطمة الزهراء. السلام عليك يا ابن خديجة الكبرى. السلام عليك يا صار الله وابن صاره والوتر الموتور. أشهد أنك قد أقمت الصلاة وآتيت الزكاة وأمرت بالمعروف ونهيت عن المنكر وأطعت الله ورسوله حتى أتاك اليقين. فلعن الله أمة قتلتك ولعن الله أمة ظلمتك ولعن الله أمة سمعت بذلك فرضيت به. يا مولاي يا أبا عبد الله، أشهد أنك كنت نورا في الأسلاب الشامخة والأرحام المطهرة، لم تنجسك الجاهلية بأنجاسها ولم تلبسك من مدلهمات ثيابها. وأشهد أنك من داعم الدين وأركان المؤمنين. وأشهد أنك الإمام البر التقي الرضي الزكي الحادي المهدي. وأشهد أن الأئمة من ولدك كلمة التقوى وأعلام الهدى والعروة الوثقى والحجة على أهل الدنيا. وأشهد الله وملائكته وأنبياءه ورسله أني بكم مؤمن وبإيابكم موقن، بشرائع ديني وخواتيم عملي، وقلبي لقلبكم سلم وأمري لأمركم متبع. صلوات الله عليكم وعلى أرواحكم وعلى أجسادكم وعلى أجسامكم وعلى شاهدكم وعلى غائبكم وعلى ظاهركم وعلى باطنكم. زيارة علي أكبر. السلام عليك يا ابن رسول الله. السلام عليك يا ابن نبي الله. السلام عليك يا ابن أمير المؤمنين. السلام عليك يا ابن الحسين الشهيد. السلام عليك أيها الشهيد وابن الشهيد. السلام عليك أيها المظلوم وابن المظلوم. لعن الله أمة قتلتك ولعن الله أمة ظلمتك ولعن الله أمة سمعت بذلك فرضيت به. Ziyarat of all the martyrs of Karbala. السلام عليكم يا أولياء الله وأحبائي. السلام عليكم يا أصفياء الله وأودائي. السلام عليكم يا أنصار دين الله. السلام عليكم يا أنصار رسول الله. السلام عليكم يا أنصار أمير المؤمنين. السلام عليكم يا أنصار فاطمة سيدة نساء العالمين. السلام عليكم يا أنصار أبي محمد الحسن بن علي الزكي الناصح. السلام عليكم يا أنصار أبي عبد الله. بأبي أنتم وأمي تبتم وطابت الأرض التي فيها دفنتم وفزتم فوزا عظيما. فيا ليتني كنت معكم فأفوز معكم.
زيارة حضرت عباس. السلام عليك يا أبا الفضل العباس ابن أمير المؤمنين. السلام عليك يا ابن سيد الوسيين. السلام عليك يا ابن أول قوم الإسلام وأقدمهم إيمانا وأقومهم بدين الله وأحوتهم على الإسلام. أشهد لقد نصحت لله ولرسوله ولأخيك فنعم الأخ المواسي. فلعن الله أمة قتلتك، ولعن الله أمة ظلمتك، ولعن الله أمة استحلت منك المحارم وانتهكت حرمة الإسلام. فنعم الصابر المجاهد المحامي الناصر والأخ الدافع عن أخيه المجيب إلى طاعة ربه الراغب فيما زهد فيه غيره من ثواب الجزيل والثناء الجميل. والحقق الله بدرجة الآبائك في جنات النعيم. السلام عليك يا رسول الله.
السلام عليك يا أمير المؤمنين. السلام عليك يا فاطمة الزهراء سيدة النساء العالمين. السلام عليك يا خديجة الكبرى. السلام عليك يا حسن المجتبى. السلام عليك يا أبا عبد الله الحسين وعلى 9 المعصومين من ذريتك علي بن الحسين محمد بن علي وجعفر بن محمد وموسى بن جعفر وعلي بن موسى محمد بن علي وعلي بن محمد والحسن بن علي والحجة بن الحسن أجل الله فرجه وصح الله مخرجه وزهوره. والسلام عليكم برحمة الله وبركاته. اللهم كل وليك الحجة بن الحسن صلواتك عليه وعلى آبائه في هذه الساعة وفي كل ساعة وليا وحافظا وقودا وناصرا ودليلا وعينا حتى تسكنه أرضك طوعا وتمتعه فيها طويلا برحمتك يا أرحم الراحمين.